"I'll clean your house every day," she said, until lonely Cowboy whispered, "I chose you as my wife." The sun hung low in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the dusty streets of the small town. The air smelled faintly of hay, smoke from chimneys, and the dry, warm earth. Clara walked slowly along the main road, her worn boots kicking up small clouds of dust with every step. Her eyes scanned the row of wooden buildings, some with peeling paint, some freshly painted, looking for any kind of opportunity. She had been traveling for days, and her meager belongings were bundled into a small sack she carried over her shoulder. Life had not been kind to her lately, and she was desperate for work, food, and shelter. Her family's farm had been lost to a harsh winter and mounting debts. She had no siblings left to help her, and the people she had once relied on had moved on. Now she was alone in the world, except for the little hope she clung to in her heart. That hope whispered to her that something, or someone, was waiting just around the corner if only she could find it. As she turned a corner, Clara noticed a modest wooden house at the edge of town. Smoke curled gently from the chimney, and the yard, though tidy in places, looked like it could use a good hand. A small sign hung by the door, swinging slightly in the breeze. She walked closer and squinted at the words. Help wanted, housekeeper needed. Her heart skipped a beat. This might be the chance she had been waiting for. She stepped up onto the creaking porch and took a deep breath, smoothing the wrinkles from her simple dress. She had never been a housekeeper in the formal sense, but she knew how to clean, cook, and take care of a home. She had learned long ago how to work hard to keep a household running, and she hoped her skills would be enough to convince whoever lived here to give her a chance. The door opened suddenly, and a tall man stepped out. He looked as though he had spent years in the sun. His face was weathered, his eyes a deep brown that seemed to hold secrets, and his hands were strong and calloused. He wore a simple shirt and trousers, both dust-streaked, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. Clara felt a flicker of nervousness. "Hello," she said, her voice steady but polite. "I saw your sign. I can help with your house. I can clean, cook, and take care of things. I don't need much, just food and a place to stay." The man studied her carefully, his expression unreadable. He didn't speak at first, just looked her up and down as if weighing her words. Clara felt her stomach tighten. She had faced judgment before, but there was something about the quiet intensity in his eyes that made her hesitate. Finally, he spoke. "You want to clean my house?" His voice was calm but firm, carrying the kind of authority that made people listen without question. "Yes, sir," Clara replied. "I can do it every day. I'm fast and I work hard. I promise you won't regret it." The man tilted his head slightly, as if considering something important. "I don't usually take help, but I could use someone. It's just me here, and it's been lonely." Clara's heart softened. She sensed a quiet sadness behind his words, a loneliness that she understood more than he might realize. She gave a small, reassuring smile. "I can help," she said softly. "I don't mind being alone with you, sir. I just want to work and have a place to stay. That's all." There was a long pause. The man finally nodded. "All right, you can start tomorrow. We'll see how it goes." Clara's face lit up with relief. She had expected a harsh no, or maybe a test she wouldn't pass. Instead, he had given her a chance. She thanked him and turned to leave, but the man called out, "One last thing." "Name's Ethan," he said simply. "Clara," she replied, giving a small wave. The next morning, Clara woke before the sun, feeling both nervous and excited. She had prepared herself for a long day of work, and she wanted to make a good impression. She packed a small breakfast in a tin lunchbox and set out for Ethan's house. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of dew and freshly turned soil. When she arrived, Ethan was already outside, tending to his horses. He didn't look up when she approached, focused instead on brushing the dust from their coats. Clara hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside the house to begin her work. The place was simple but cozy. A fireplace in the main room, a few wooden chairs, a sturdy table, and shelves lined with jars and pots. Dust covered the surfaces, and there were small cobwebs in the corners, but Clara didn't let it discourage her. She started by sweeping the floor in long, steady strokes, humming quietly to herself. Then she wiped down the shelves, polished the table, and scrubbed the kitchen counters until they shone. She moved from room to room with care, noticing the small details: a picture of a woman pinned to the wall, a well-worn blanket folded neatly on a chair, a stack of letters tied with string. Each item told a story, and Clara couldn't help but wonder what Ethan's life had been like before she arrived. Ethan watched silently from the doorway, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. He said little, but the occasional nod or brief instruction showed that he was paying attention. Clara worked diligently, determined to prove herself. She felt a sense of pride in the rhythm of her work: the sweep of the broom, the cloth against the counter, the soft clatter of dishes being washed and put away. By mid-afternoon, the house looked almost brand new. Clara wiped her brow with the back of her hand and smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction. She had earned this small victory, and it gave her hope that maybe, just maybe, she had found a place where she belonged. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low and measured. "You're thorough. I'll give you that. Most people, they don't last a day here." Clara paused and looked at him, curious. "Why is that?" she asked gently. He shrugged, glancing away. "It's lonely, hard work, and I don't talk much. People get restless around me. They leave." Clara felt the pang of understanding. She knew what it was like to be lonely, to wonder if anyone would stay by your side when life got hard. She smiled softly. "I don't mind," she said simply. "I can work quietly. I can do this every day if you let me." Ethan looked at her for a long moment, as if seeing her for the first time. There was a flicker of something in his eyes. Maybe surprise, maybe admiration, maybe a mixture of both. Then he nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "We'll see how it goes." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, Clara sat on the porch, exhausted but happy. She could hear the soft clop of horses' hooves in the distance, the creak of the old wooden boards beneath her, and the faint sound of Ethan moving inside. She felt a small sense of peace, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. For the first time in months, she believed that she might have a chance at a new beginning, and as she watched the stars begin to appear one by one in the deepening sky, she silently promised herself that she would work hard, do her best, and maybe, just maybe, find a kind of home here with Ethan and the little house at the edge of town. It was the start of something new, a chapter of her life she hadn't expected, but felt ready to embrace. And deep down, she wondered if the quiet cowboy who had given her a chance might, in his own way, be as lonely as she was. And maybe, together, they could find a way to fill the silence with something stronger, warmer, and lasting. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. Clara woke early, as she always did, careful not to wake Ethan. She dressed quickly in her simple clothes, tied her hair back with a ribbon, and quietly stepped outside. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of grass, horses, and earth. The house looked peaceful in the morning light, and Clara felt a small thrill at the thought of continuing her work. Ethan was already outside, tending to his small garden. He moved with quiet purpose, planting seeds and turning the soil, his hands covered in dirt. Clara watched him for a moment, admiring his dedication. There was something calming about his routine, something steady and reliable. She quietly picked up a broom and began sweeping the porch, careful not to disturb him. After a few minutes, Ethan looked up and nodded slightly. "Morning," he said in his deep, steady voice. "Good morning," Clara replied, returning the nod with a smile. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "You're not," he said, turning back to the garden. "You can start inside. The dust from yesterday will settle overnight." Clara nodded and went inside. The house was quiet except for the soft creak of the floorboards beneath her feet. She began by dusting the shelves and polishing the table. As she worked, she noticed small details she had missed yesterday. A tiny crack in the windowsill, a faded photograph tucked into a frame, a pair of worn gloves left by the door. Each item told her more about the man who lived here. By mid-morning, the house was spotless. Clara moved to the kitchen, washing dishes and organizing the pantry. She hummed softly as she worked, the sound filling the quiet space. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of belonging, even in this simple, dusty house at the edge of town. Ethan came inside around noon, brushing dirt from his hands. He glanced at the kitchen and raised an eyebrow. "Looks good," he said simply. "Thank you," Clara replied, smiling. She noticed a faint smile tug at the corner of his lips, a small sign that her efforts were appreciated. For the next few days, Clara settled into a rhythm. She cleaned the house from top to bottom, prepared simple but hearty meals, and even tended to the small garden alongside Ethan. Though they spoke little at first, their silence was comfortable rather than awkward. Clara learned to read his expressions, the way his eyes softened when he was satisfied, or the way he frowned slightly when something was wrong. Ethan, in turn, began to notice her care and attention to detail, her quiet strength and steady determination. One afternoon, as Clara swept the floor in the main room, she glanced out the window and saw Ethan repairing the fence around the garden. The sun glinted off his hair, and she couldn't help but admire his dedication. He worked tirelessly, pausing only occasionally to wipe sweat from his brow. Clara felt a small warmth in her chest. She had expected a gruff, distant man, but there was something gentle in his actions, a care for the land and for the small things that mattered. After finishing the sweeping, Clara moved to the kitchen to prepare lunch. She chopped vegetables, stirred the stew, and set the table. When Ethan came inside, he glanced at the food and nodded in approval. "Smells good," he said, sitting down at the table. "Thank you," Clara replied, serving the meal. She noticed him studying her quietly as he ate, his expression thoughtful. For a moment she wondered what he was thinking, but she didn't press him. She had learned that patience was important, especially with someone like Ethan. As the days passed, their conversations grew longer, though still careful. Clara shared stories of her family and the farm she had lost, speaking softly but with warmth. Ethan listened more than he spoke, occasionally offering a comment or a question. He told her little about his past, only hints of a life spent traveling and working the land, a life marked by solitude and quiet moments. One evening, after a long day of work, Clara and Ethan sat outside on the porch, watching the sun dip below the hills. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and the air was cool and gentle. Clara felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. "You work hard," Ethan said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Clara smiled. "I have to. Life doesn't wait for anyone." He nodded, his gaze distant. "Most people wouldn't stay this long. They'd get tired, or bored, or afraid." "I don't mind," Clara said quietly. "I like the work. And I like helping." Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You're different," he said finally. "Most people don't care about the little things. You do." Clara felt a flush of warmth at his words. "I've had to be careful," she admitted. "Life teaches you to notice the details, to take care of what you have while you can." Ethan nodded slowly, as if considering her words. For a moment they sat in silence, watching the colors of the sunset fade into the deep blue of evening. Clara felt a sense of connection growing, a quiet understanding that neither of them had expected, but both welcomed. The next morning, Clara noticed a small change in Ethan. He spoke more, asked questions about her life, and even smiled more often. She realized that her presence, her care for the house, and her willingness to work alongside him had begun to break through the walls he had built around himself. One afternoon, as Clara tended the garden, Ethan came over with a small basket of vegetables. "Thought you might like some help," he said, his tone lighter than usual. "I'd appreciate that," Clara replied, smiling. Together they worked in the garden, planting seeds, pulling weeds, and laughing quietly at small mistakes. For the first time, Clara felt a sense of partnership, a feeling that they were no longer just two people in the same house, but two people working together towards something meaningful. As the weeks went by, their bond grew stronger. Clara noticed the small ways Ethan cared for her, bringing her a warm drink when she was tired, offering a hand when she climbed a stepladder, or simply sitting nearby in comfortable silence. Ethan, in turn, began to trust her more, sharing small details about his past, his dreams, and his fears. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Clara asked, "Have you always lived alone?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Mostly. I've had company before, but I prefer quiet." "It's simpler, I understand," Clara said softly. "I've been alone too, longer than I'd like to admit. But I think being alone teaches you to appreciate the people who stay." Ethan looked at her, his eyes thoughtful. "You're right," he said quietly. "Not many people would stay here day after day. You do." Clara felt her heart swell with a mix of pride and affection. "I'm not leaving," she said simply. "Not unless you want me to." He smiled faintly, a rare expression that made her feel a small thrill. "Good," he said, "because I don't want you to." That night, as Clara lay in the small guest room, she thought about how much had changed in just a few days. She had come to Ethan's house seeking work and shelter, but she had found something more: a quiet understanding, a sense of connection, and the beginnings of trust. She realized that loneliness could be shared, and that sharing it didn't make you weak. It made you human. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of birds singing and the first light of dawn spilling into the room. She dressed quickly and stepped outside to find Ethan already at work. She smiled to herself, feeling a sense of purpose and belonging. Together they faced the simple challenges of daily life, and in doing so, they began to build a quiet friendship, one small act of care at a time. Clara knew that their relationship was still new, fragile, and uncertain, but she also knew that there was something special here, something worth nurturing. And as she began her daily chores, she felt a quiet hope growing in her heart that maybe, just maybe, this lonely cowboy and the young woman who cleaned his house could find a way to fill the quiet spaces in their lives together. And so the days passed, filled with work, laughter, and quiet conversations. Clara continued to clean, cook, and tend the garden, while Ethan worked the land and shared glimpses of his life. Each day brought them closer, slowly breaking down the walls of solitude they had built around themselves. And as the sun set each evening, casting a warm glow over the little house at the edge of town, Clara realized that she had found something she had been searching for all along, a sense of home, and the beginning of a bond that could grow into something lasting and true. Days turned into weeks, and the small house at the edge of town became more than just a place to live. For Clara, it was slowly turning into a home. She had settled into a comfortable routine, cleaning, cooking, and tending the garden alongside Ethan. And for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of belonging, not just to the house, but to the life she was beginning to build there. Ethan, too, seemed to be changing in subtle ways. He still spoke little, but his eyes were softer, his expressions more open. He began to leave small notes for Clara when he had to be out early, reminders about chores or instructions for the garden. She found a jar of fresh milk on the counter one morning with a note that simply said, "For your tea, -E." Small gestures, but they carried meaning, and Clara treasured them. One afternoon, as the sun climbed high and the heat began to press against the walls of the house, Clara was in the kitchen preparing a simple lunch. The smell of fresh bread baking in the oven filled the room. She hummed softly, moving around with ease, when she noticed a shadow at the window. She turned and saw Ethan standing outside, wiping sweat from his brow. "You're working too hard," she said lightly, though her concern was clear. Ethan shook his head. "I can't let the garden go. The soil needs attention. These plants won't wait." Clara smiled, setting down the knife she had been using to chop vegetables. "I'll help," she said. "We can finish together and then rest." Ethan hesitated, glancing at her. Then, with a small nod, he set aside his tools and joined her in the garden. The two of them worked in silence at first, tending the plants carefully, watering the soil, and pulling out weeds. There was a rhythm to their work, a quiet cooperation that didn't need words. Occasionally, their hands brushed as they reached for the same plant, and each time they exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of something growing between them. By mid-afternoon, the garden was neat and flourishing. Clara leaned against the fence, wiping sweat from her brow while Ethan straightened his back and surveyed their work. "You did well," he said finally, his voice quiet but sincere. Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest. "So did you," she replied. "We make a good team." Ethan nodded, but there was a hesitation in his eyes. Clara sensed that he wanted to say more, but didn't know how. She decided not to push. Sometimes the quiet moments carried more meaning than words. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Clara and Ethan carried their tools back to the house. Inside, the air was cool, and the aroma of freshly baked bread mixed with the scent of the evening fire. Clara set the table while Ethan tended to the small fireplace, adding logs to keep the room warm and inviting. They ate in silence at first, the soft clatter of utensils the only sound. Clara noticed that Ethan seemed more relaxed than usual, his shoulders less tense, his expression calmer. She realized that these shared moments, working together, eating together, simply being in the same space, were slowly building trust between them. After dinner, they sat outside on the porch, the cool night air wrapping around them. The stars were beginning to appear, one by one, twinkling in the clear sky. Clara wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, feeling a quiet contentment. Do you ever feel lonely? She asked softly, almost to herself. Ethan was quiet for a moment, watching the darkening sky. Then he spoke, his voice low and steady. I have, for a long time. It comes and goes. Mostly I've been used to it. Clara nodded, understanding more than he could know. I know that feeling, she said. Being alone for too long makes you forget what it's like to have someone care. But I think sharing it makes it easier, even just a little. Ethan turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the starlight. There was a softness there that Clara had not seen before. You're different, he said quietly. You don't just talk. You notice things. You care. Clara smiled faintly, feeling her heart beat a little faster. I've had to care, she admitted. Life teaches you to look after the small things, and sometimes the small things matter the most. For a long while they sat in silence, letting the night wrap around them. Clara felt a sense of peace, a sense that she and Ethan were slowly becoming something more than just two people sharing a house. There was a connection growing, quiet but strong, built on trust, respect, and the simple acts of caring for one another. A few days later, a storm rolled in, dark clouds gathering over the hills and sending strong winds across the town. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets, drumming against the roof of the house. Clara was inside, moving quickly to secure windows and make sure the house was safe. Ethan, returning from checking the fences, found her moving with purpose, her hair damp from the rain that had blown inside. You've got everything under control, he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. Clara looked at him, surprised. You think so? Yes, he said simply. You're good at this. Better than I expected. Clara felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. I just... I just like keeping things in order. Makes the world feel a little safer. Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment the storm outside seemed to fade, replaced by the quiet intimacy of shared understanding. They moved through the house together, checking locks, tying down shutters, and lighting lamps so the rooms would be bright and welcoming despite the storm. As the evening wore on, the rain softened to a gentle patter, and the storm passed. The air smelled of wet earth and freshness, and the world outside seemed calm again. Clara and Ethan sat by the fire, sipping warm tea, their hands brushing occasionally as they reached for their cups. You know, Ethan said quietly, I didn't think anyone would stay this long. Most people, they'd leave after a few days. Clara smiled softly. I've stayed longer than that before, she said. And sometimes you have to wait for the right person to notice, or for the right place. Ethan studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. I think I noticed, he said finally. Clara's heart skipped a beat. She didn't respond immediately, unsure of what to say. Instead, she let the quiet settle around them, feeling the warmth of the fire, the lingering scent of rain, and the quiet comfort of being together. Over the next few days, their bond continued to grow. They shared more than chores and meals. They shared stories, laughter, and small secrets. Clara learned about Ethan's love for the land, his memories of distant places, and the few people who had once been important in his life. Ethan, in turn, listened to Clara's stories of her family, her struggles, and the dreams she still held close to her heart. One afternoon, as they worked together repairing a broken fence near the garden, Ethan paused and looked at Clara. You're steady, he said. No matter what comes.
You keep going.
I admire that. Clara felt a warm flush on her cheeks. I have to, she said simply. Life doesn't wait for anyone. And I think it's easier when someone notices. Ethan's gaze lingered on her for a moment, thoughtful and quiet. Then he turned back to the fence, working with a little more care than before. Clara couldn't help but notice the small smile tugging at the corner of his lips, a sign that the bond between them was deepening in ways neither of them fully understood yet. As evening fell, Clara and Ethan sat on the porch again, watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and crimson. The quiet comfort of their companionship was stronger now, built on trust, shared work, and small acts of care. Clara felt a quiet happiness, the kind that comes not from grand gestures or sudden changes, but from the steady presence of someone who truly sees you. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of peace and hope. She realized that loneliness could be shared, and that sharing it didn't make you weak. It made you stronger. And as she looked at Ethan, the quiet cowboy who had once seemed so distant, she felt a small spark of something new, the possibility of love, gentle and patient, growing quietly between them. That night, as Clara lay in her room, she thought about the past few weeks. She had come to Ethan's house seeking work, but she had found something more, a sense of home, a partner in daily life, and the beginnings of a deep connection that promised warmth, trust, and perhaps even love. She closed her eyes with a soft smile, knowing that the journey was just beginning, and that the quiet bond between her and Ethan was a story worth nurturing. Days passed quietly at the small house at the edge of town, but Clara sensed a subtle change in the air. The routine they had grown accustomed to was no longer just work and companionship. It was beginning to carry emotions neither of them had spoken aloud. There was a warmth in Ethan's gaze that lingered longer than necessary, a hesitation in his voice when he spoke, and sometimes a shadow of doubt in Clara's own heart. She tried not to overthink it, but the truth was impossible to ignore. She had begun to care for him more than she expected. One morning, as Clara swept the floor in the main room, she heard the sound of approaching horses. Through the window, she saw a small group of townsfolk riding past the house, their faces familiar. Rumors traveled fast in a small town, and she already felt the tension rising in her chest. She worried that people might question why she stayed with Ethan or what her intentions were. The thought made her uneasy, but she brushed it off. What mattered was the trust between her and Ethan, not the whispers of others. Ethan returned from the barn, brushing dirt from his hands. He noticed the worry in her expression immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "Nothing," Clara replied quickly, forcing a smile. "Just some people passing by. Nothing to worry about." Ethan studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Don't let them bother you," he said simply. "This is our place. Our choices matter more than gossip." Clara felt a small wave of relief. His words reassured her, but she couldn't shake the unease entirely. She had learned long ago that life often brought challenges when you least expected them, and she sensed that this quiet peace might soon be tested. That afternoon, as Clara tended the garden, Ethan approached with a thoughtful expression. "Clara," he said slowly, "I need to ask you something." Clara looked up, curious but cautious. "What is it?" "I've been thinking," Ethan said, his voice lower than usual, "about the future, about this life we've started together. And I wonder, do you see yourself staying here long term?" Clara paused, unsure how to answer. She had hoped that the question wouldn't come so soon, yet part of her had been waiting for it. She wanted to tell him that she did see a future here, that she felt at home with him, but the words caught in her throat. I, I, I like being here, she said finally, choosing her words carefully. I feel safe and appreciated, but I don't want to rush anything or make promises I can't keep. Ethan nodded slowly, as if considering her answer. I understand, he said quietly. I don't want to rush either, but I want you to know that I value what we have, more than I can say. But Clara felt her heart swell with a mix of hope and nervousness. She wanted to trust him, to believe that his words were true, but she also remembered the loneliness she had carried for so long. What if this connection was fragile and could be broken by something as simple as fear or doubt? The next few days brought a mixture of calm and subtle tension. Clara continued her daily chores, cleaning the house, cooking meals, and tending the garden. Ethan continued his work on the land, repairing fences, caring for the horses, and occasionally sharing small stories from his past. Yet, beneath the surface, an unspoken question lingered between them. Where did this bond lead? One evening, as Clara was sweeping the porch, she noticed Ethan standing at the edge of the garden, staring at the horizon. The sun was setting, casting long shadows and painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. Clara approached him quietly. "Thinking about something?" she asked gently. Ethan shook his head, then paused. "I'm trying to figure out how to say something," he admitted. "It's hard for me. I'm not used to speaking about feelings." Clara nodded, understanding more than he realized. "Take your time," she said softly. "I'm listening." He turned to her, his eyes serious but vulnerable. "Clara, I care about you, more than I've cared about anyone in a long time. But I don't know how to show it properly. I don't want to scare you or make you feel trapped." Clara felt a rush of warmth and emotion. Her chest tightened, and for a moment, she struggled to find words. Finally, she said, "Ethan, I care about you too. And I'm not scared. I just need time to understand it all, just like you do." A small smile tugged at the corner of Ethan's lips. "Time," he repeated, as if saying it aloud gave him courage. "We can have that. I want to try. With you." The next morning, Clara awoke to a brisk, clear day. She dressed quickly and stepped outside to find Ethan already working in the barn. As she approached, she noticed something unusual. He was moving more slowly than usual, his face tense. She paused for a moment, unsure what to say. "You okay?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. Ethan paused, then nodded, but his eyes were troubled. "Just thinking," he said, "about life and choices and what matters most." Clara nodded, sensing the depth of his thoughts. "It's natural to wonder about those things," she said softly. "We all do." He looked at her, a mixture of hesitation and vulnerability in his gaze. "Clara, I've been alone for a long time. I've built walls around myself. And now you're here. And I don't want to lose this. But I don't know how to take the next step." Clara felt her heart ache with empathy. She had felt the same fear herself, the fear of giving too much, of trusting someone and being hurt. She reached out and placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Ethan, the next step can wait until we're ready. Don't be afraid to show me who you are. That's what matters most." He looked at her hand on his arm, a small but meaningful gesture. Slowly he relaxed, and a faint smile appeared. "I think I can do that," he said quietly. As the days continued, Clara noticed the small ways Ethan began to open up. He shared memories from his childhood, stories of past journeys, and even moments of regret and longing. She listened carefully, offering understanding and compassion. In return, she shared her own memories, her struggles, and the hopes she held for the future. Yet despite the growing connection, there were moments of doubt and fear. Clara worried about overstepping her place in his life, about being too forward or misreading his intentions. Ethan wrestled with his own fears, fear of vulnerability, fear of change, fear of admitting that he had finally found someone he cared for deeply. One evening, as a gentle rain fell outside, they sat together on the porch, listening to the soft patter against the roof. The fire inside the house crackled warmly, casting a glow through the windows. Clara noticed Ethan's gaze lingering on her, thoughtful and intense. "Clara," he said finally, his voice low, "I've been thinking about us, about what this means. And I don't want to wait any longer to tell you something important." Clara felt her breath catch. She had sensed this moment approaching, but had not expected it to arrive so soon. She nodded, encouraging him to speak, her heart pounding. I've chosen you," Ethan said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to say it properly, but you're the one I want. Not just to stay here, but in my life. To be more than friends, more than companions. I chose you." Clara felt a rush of emotion she could hardly describe. Relief, joy, and a deep sense of belonging flooded through her. She reached for his hand, holding it gently. "Ethan, I feel the same. I've been afraid to say it, but I've chosen you too." For the first time, the tension between them dissolved, replaced by a quiet, profound understanding. They sat together on the porch, hands intertwined, listening to the rain, feeling the warmth of the fire, and knowing that their bond had reached a new depth. The walls they had built around themselves were slowly coming down, brick by brick, replaced by trust, love, and a shared sense of home. That night, as Clara lay in her room, she thought about how far they had come. From strangers brought together by circumstance, they had grown into companions, friends, and now, something even deeper. She knew there would still be challenges, moments of doubt, and the occasional fear of losing what they had found. But she also knew that they had chosen each other, and that choice was stronger than any obstacle. And in that quiet understanding, Clara felt a deep sense of peace. She had found not only work and shelter, but a partner, a confidant, and the beginnings of a love that promised to grow stronger with each passing day. The sun rose slowly over the hills, casting a soft golden light across the small house at the edge of town. Birds sang their morning songs, and the gentle breeze carried the smell of dew and fresh earth. Clara stirred from her sleep, the warmth of the day already hinting at something new. Today felt different, though she couldn't yet explain why. There was a quiet energy in the air, a sense that something important was about to happen. She dressed quickly and stepped outside, her eyes scanning the yard where Ethan was already working. He moved with his usual quiet focus, repairing a section of the fence that had loosened during the recent rains. His strong hands moved with care, and his brow was furrowed in concentration. Clara watched him for a moment, her heart swelling with affection. She had come to know him so well over the past weeks. The quiet cowboy who had seemed so distant now felt like a part of her own life, steady and reliable, yet full of unspoken emotions. "Morning," she said softly, stepping closer. Ethan looked up and nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Morning," he replied. There was a pause. Then he added, "You're early." I couldn't wait to start the day, Clara said lightly, though her heart raced. She didn't yet know exactly why this day felt so important, but a small intuition told her that it would change everything. Ethan straightened and wiped his hands on a cloth, then looked directly at her. There was something different in his expression: seriousness, vulnerability, and a hint of determination. Clara felt a flutter of nerves. "Clara," he said slowly, "I've been thinking a lot about us, about everything. And I realize there's something I can't keep inside any longer." Clara's heart quickened. She had sensed that he had feelings deeper than friendship, but hearing the words, even before he spoke them fully, made her pulse race. She nodded, encouraging him silently to continue. "I don't want to live another day without telling you," Ethan continued. "You've been here, in this house, in my life, and you've changed it. You've changed me. I've spent so long alone, keeping to myself, but you've made me realize something I can't ignore anymore." Clara's breath caught in her throat. She stepped closer, her eyes meeting his, full of hope and anticipation. "I chose you," Ethan said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Clara, I chose you as my wife. I don't just want someone to work alongside me or share this house. I want you in my life fully. I want to face the days together, the good ones and the hard ones. I choose you, and I want you to choose me too." For a moment, Clara was speechless. Her heart felt as if it would burst from the joy and relief swelling inside her. She had longed to hear words like these, but never dared to hope they would come so clearly, so sincerely. She stepped closer, reaching out to take his hands in hers. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion, I've felt the same way. I was afraid to admit it, even to myself. I didn't want to be hurt again. But I choose you too. I want to be with you, not just in this house, not just in your life. I want to share everything with you. I... Ethan's eyes glimmered with a mixture of relief and joy. Slowly, he pulled her into his arms, holding her gently but firmly. For the first time, they let themselves feel the depth of their emotions without fear or hesitation. The world around them, the fields, the house, the distant hills, seemed to fade, leaving only the quiet warmth of their embrace. They stayed like that for a long moment, simply holding each other, listening to the soft rustle of the wind and the distant call of birds. Clara felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She realized that this was the home she had been searching for, not just a place, but a person with whom she could share her life, her heart, and her hopes. When they finally pulled back slightly, Ethan brushed a strand of hair from her face and smiled. "I don't know if I ever said this properly," he admitted, "but you've made me feel alive again. I never thought I could feel this way after so long alone." Clara's eyes softened. "And you've given me something I didn't even know I was missing. A place to belong, someone to trust, someone to care for." They spent the rest of the morning together, preparing breakfast as a team. Clara cooked and Ethan helped with small tasks, their movements coordinated, familiar, and full of shared understanding. Laughter came easily, and even the small disagreements, like whose turn it was to fetch water or carry logs, were met with gentle teasing and smiles. The atmosphere was light, joyful, and full of promise. After breakfast, they stepped outside, the sun high in the sky casting a warm glow across the land. Ethan suggested they take a walk to the nearby hills, and Clara agreed eagerly. They moved side by side, the comfortable silence between them, punctuated by soft conversation about the garden, the animals, and the simple pleasures of life. As they reached the top of the hill, they paused to look out over the small town and the surrounding fields. The view was breathtaking, the world stretching out endlessly before them. Clara felt a sense of awe, not just at the beauty of the landscape, but at the life she was beginning to build with Ethan. Ethan turned to her, taking her hands in his. "Clara," he said softly, "I don't want to imagine a life without you. I want us to face everything together. Sunny days, storms, challenges, and joys. I want you as my partner, my equal, my wife." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of happiness. "I want that too," she whispered. "I want all of it, with you." They embraced again, this time with a deeper sense of commitment. The wind tugged at their hair, the sun warmed their faces, and the world seemed to shine around them. For the first time, they allowed themselves to believe that they had found not just companionship, but a love that was patient, strong, and lasting. The days that followed were filled with a new sense of joy and purpose. Clara continued her work around the house, but now each task felt infused with love and care for both the home and the man she had chosen. Ethan, in turn, began to include her in more of the decisions around the farm, seeking her advice and valuing her opinion. Together, they faced each day as partners, supporting one another, and slowly weaving their lives together. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they sat together on the porch, holding hands and watching the sky turn shades of orange, pink, and purple. Clara rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "You know," she said softly, "I never thought I would feel this happy, safe, loved, after everything I've been through." Ethan pressed a gentle kiss to her hair. "Neither did I," he admitted. "But I'm glad we found each other. I'll never take this for granted." They sat in silence, enjoying the warmth of each other's presence, the peace of the home they had built, and the certainty that their lives were now intertwined. There was no need for grand gestures or dramatic declarations. They had found something stronger, a steady, enduring love, built on trust, care, and choice. Weeks turned into months, and their life together grew richer with each passing day. Clara and Ethan faced challenges. The farm demanded attention, weather brought obstacles, and occasional doubts crept in. But they faced them together, never losing sight of the bond they had chosen. They shared meals, laughter, work, and quiet evenings by the fire. They celebrated small victories and comforted one another during difficult moments. And every evening, as they watched the sunset over the hills, they were reminded of the moment when Ethan had whispered the words that changed everything. "I chose you as my wife." Those words had become the foundation of their life together, a promise spoken softly but felt deeply in their hearts. Clara often thought back to the day she first stepped onto the porch, nervous and uncertain, hoping for work and a place to stay. She never could have imagined that this house, this quiet life, and the man who once seemed so distant would become her world. And yet, here she was, living a life filled with warmth, love, and the quiet joy of being seen, valued, and chosen. Ethan, too, often reflected on that day. He had lived for years in solitude, believing that no one could ever truly understand him or stay by his side. But Clara had changed that. She had brought light, care, and unwavering support into his life. And in choosing her, he had found not only a partner, but a home for his heart. Together, they built a life full of shared memories, quiet moments, laughter, and love. And as the stars appeared each night over the small house at the edge of town, They knew that they had found something rare and precious, a love chosen freely, nurtured patiently, and cherished deeply, a love that would carry them through all the days to come.